Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Dennis Brown. I want to thank you for joining me for another Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Today, I have a special guest, another interview from a freight broker that did over $353,000 in 1 month leveraging the freight agent business model. So this is probably one of the first times we've really talked about this, particularly on an interview. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So in a few minutes, I'll be introducing my guest. And we're going to have a conversation about the whys and wherefores, the hows, the whats, the whens, and all that, and some lessons learned along the way. So stay tuned on that. And then we're going to do a live Q&A at the end. So that's the agenda. We're going to do the interview, then we're going to do live Q&A. So for those of you that have questions, stick around to the end. We're going to be answering questions. You'll be able to answer questions directly to my guest or myself or both. So make sure you stick around for that. That's always a very popular part of the program. And I want to thank you for being here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dennis Brown, not Bound, Brown. I've been an entrepreneur for, almost 30 years now. Started a freight brokerage in 2003, grew it to about $80 million a year in sales, sold that business, but I'm also the owner of freightbrokerbootcamp.com, one of the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training programs. So you can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Again, offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee, and we've trained over 10,000 students in the last decade. So there's probably a bunch of students in the audience, past students, current students, people are involved in the course or maybe have had some success along the way. So welcome. There's probably some new people in the audience that have never, ever heard of me before, and they're just joining the stream live now, which is fantastic. And what I want you to do right now is hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. While we wait for some people to get live, I'll do some shout outs and then we will go from there. So good morning, good afternoon, welcome. Leonard from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Leonard from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Welcome. Socrates 49 from Virginia. Clement from Delaware. Mr. Unknown, welcome. Noah Edmonds from Fort Liberty. John Killenbeck, welcome. Blair, welcome. Kevin from Raleigh, North Carolina. Let's see. Socrates from Virginia. I think I said that. We got Kevin Perry from Raleigh, North Carolina. We got Jomo Mighty from Florida, as usual. We have Blair from Alberta, Canada. Jamarcus, welcome. Marilyn from Austin, Texas. We have Luke from Moses, Washington. Derek from Richmond, Virginia. Jamarcus from Des Plaines, Illinois. Slava from Nashville, Tennessee. Rishi from Kitchener, Ontario. We got people from all over the place. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. Again, I do these lives every Monday at noon. You can catch them on replay. And for those of you that are catching this on replay, hit me up in the comments with hashtag replay. I'd love to hear from you. But set a reminder on your phone, on your iPhone or your Android or whatever. Set a reminder that every Monday at noon, probably you might want to set that reminder for 11:45 a.m. East Coast time, that you can join this live training absolutely free 100% of the time. Okay. You notice there was no credit card to get in, but the price of admission is this. Hit the like button right now, right? And your job throughout this is to pay attention, put away all the distractions, and then comment, right? Give us some feedback, write down some questions. Hold your questions to the end because we are going to be doing live Q&A. I'm going to be introducing my guest here in just a minute. And then we're going to talk about, again, how he was able to grow his freight brokerage to over $353,000 a month in sales and revenue, leveraging the agent business model, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about his journey. So appreciate you guys all joining me. We've got quite a few people live. A lot of people are going to catch us on replay. Oh, cool. Yeah, we got a bunch more people. We have Resilient Freight Solution from Dallas, Cynthia from Maryland, Angel from Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, Ben from Sacramento, John from New Jersey, TBD from Memphis, Katricia from Clearwater, Florida. So we got people from all over the place. Again, thank you so much for joining me. And without further ado, let's bring up my guest. So this is my guest. Gentleman's name is Jason Rabine. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dennis.
Thank you so much. We connected on LinkedIn, and we've been chatting on and off for the last several months. Yep. And I wanted to have you on because today we want to talk about kind of how your startup journey happened, but more importantly, we want to hone in on how you were able to grow your freight brokerage to over $353,000 a month in sales, leveraging the freight agent business model. So that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people. I talk about it in my Freight Broker Bootcamp, but I haven't really talked a lot about it on the live here. So why don't you give us, a 1-minute background, because you have a little bit of background in logistics.
Yep.
Bring us up to speed real quick, and then we'll dive right in.
Love it. Thank you for the intro. So I'm Jason Rabine. I'm the owner of Max Freight Lines. We opened our freight brokerage last March. Full transparency, I had no idea it was going to transform into an agent model. I opened it just for myself. It's just for me to book freight, not have to worry about corporate America above me. I got to pick and choose my customers. I came into the agent model as an 8-year veteran at a corporate brokerage. I started at Allen Lund in 2014. A couple of years ago, right before COVID hit, I just got tired of the corporate, I guess you could call it stressors. I was a manager. I was still on call. My pay was tied to everybody in the office, which in corporate America, that's how it works. But then I worked my butt off, and there were times where my pay was affected by people who didn't have my work ethic. And so at some point, I just kind of said, you know what, I'm done with brokerage altogether. I quit on a Friday, had no plan, just sent in my resignation and off I went. But being an account manager and a broker with a solid core group of carriers, within 30 minutes of quitting, my phone blew up. People want to know, well, where are you going? Can we follow you? What about our freight? And I didn't realize until that moment that it translated to the person, not the company, right? And so a good friend of mine at AG Needs, one of my largest carriers, reached out, said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to take 30 days off. I'm going to take a month off. I need a vacation. I'm going to go camping with the kids. No word of a lie. 30 days later, 8:01 in the morning, Brandon called me and said, okay, well, what now? And he offered me an agent position. And I had no idea anything about this. And he said, well, you work for yourself, 50-50 split, take off, go do your thing. And that first year, I did almost 2 million in sales by myself. Now, granted, those numbers are inflated because those are COVID numbers. But during COVID, I did 2 million in sales by myself. I made 400 or 500 grand. And I went, holy crap. Whoa. When I went to do my taxes the next year, my tax guy goes, hey, you owe half of that in taxes. Are you going to write all this off? I was not prepared for that. So I got a little smackdown, and my tax guy said, listen, why are you paying someone else 50%? Just open your own. You already have a proof of concept. So, it wasn't right away, but it was a month later where I said, you know what? I'm going to bet on myself. What's the harm? If it doesn't work, I go back to corporate America, whatever, or I go be an agent. And so for the first 6 months of last year, I brokered freight by myself. I struggled. Opening your own brokerage is really rough if you don't have credit. These factoring companies won't extend you credit without 6 months, 8 months of record, your days to pay average, being listed on Ansonia. So, and I was telling you earlier before we hopped on the air, I was lucky that I had legacy customers and carriers where a lot of them didn't require factoring companies. They self-finance. So I was able to get some revenue in. I think I finished last year at 150 grand in revenue in 6 months. Nothing major, but definitely wasn't where I thought I would be. And just through my activity on LinkedIn, I had people reaching out to me asking if I was hiring agents. And it slowly kind of turned into, well, let's investigate that. And, in February, we did 80 grand in revenue. In March, we did 150, 200, 300. We're pacing for 400 this month. It just slowly kind of builds the momentum. And I love it. I love everything about it. I'll say this, as an agency owner, the one thing I miss the most is booking freight all day. Because, I have to kind of toe the company line, both on the agent availability and my customer availability. But man, I work with some wonderful agents who just, they teach me things that I never knew in corporate America. They're niche based. A lot of them are, one guy just does heavy haul and overdimensional. Another is just drayage. Another is pure open deck. I'm a 1-in-1 dry guy. That's all I've ever done. So now I'm getting this exposure into so many other niches, so that when any customer comes to us, if I don't know how to handle it, I pass it off to an agent and we split the commission. So I don't turn it down where I would have before. Now I just roll it over into the best, person who could fill that role. And it's been tremendous.
Perfect. All right, listen, let's pull that apart a little bit. So you started your brokerage in March of 22?
23.
March of
Sorry,
March of this year, 23.
Last year.
March of 22.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it's been March of 22.
About a year and a half.
Yeah, about a year and a half. Okay. So we've been about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And you're on pace to do, you're doing 350, on pace to do 400,000 this month in gross revenue.
We're pacing for about 3 million in sales this year.
Gotcha. And what are you kind of your average profit margins, your gross profit margins?
Well, as a company, after paying the agents, we're sitting at about 8.5%, 9%. The agents are right around 12% before the split. So they're getting their number. They're getting their number.
Gotcha. So on a gross margins are around 12% before you're paying the agents.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, great. All right, perfect. All right. So first of all, yeah, I mean, you had some experience coming from the brokerage industry, from the corporate brokerage side. So that definitely helps. You had some relationships, you understood the workflow, you understood some of the challenges, the demands and that were going on the carrier side and the shipper side. So that definitely helps. So if anybody's listening to this, who's coming from the corporate brokerage side or the corporate carrier side, or even from the corporate shipper side, you definitely have a leg up in expediting your learning curve, right? You're going to be able to fold time a little bit. And a lot of students that I've worked with over the years come from those backgrounds, but a lot of people don't have that type of experience. And so, Jason talked a little bit about, how it can be challenging when you first start from a credit perspective, from having your authority, aging your authority, things of that nature. There are definitely challenges in every business, but I can tell you, I've had many of the students that you've seen me interview here, those of you that are watching, most of them didn't have the advantage of the experience that Jason did, right? And, you work through those issues. I don't care what business it is. I don't care if it's a pizza, if you're in the pizza business or the insurance business or the real estate business or the bar business, whatever business you're in, there's always going to be those challenges, right? But what I found is that the people that really want it, the people that really dig in, and the people that have planned properly and have a little bit of a runway can navigate through those. And of course, it's going to tighten your belt buckle up, right? You probably didn't make nearly as much money month one of being a broker as you did your best month in working in corporate America. So it takes a little bit of time, but so let's dive in a little bit now. You talked about some of the niches, right? And I thought that was really interesting so I want to pull that apart because I found the exact same thing. When we first started out in brokerage, when I started out in 2003, we were a one pick, one drop van guy, right? That's what we did. It was Northeast outbound van freight. There was a glut of vans and I knew we had access to them. And ultimately we sold that capacity. And then when we started expanding out, we started learning a whole lot about all these different niches. Talk to us a little bit about that. You mentioned a little bit about it, but you talked about heavy haul and some of the other niches. What are some of the niches that you guys are doing now?
So we do everything now. I mean, we're heavy into Canadian imports.
Okay.
We do a lot of stuff with moving companies that move pods in and out of Canada. That's probably our biggest business right now. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of drayage, a lot of box truck stuff for trade shows, trade show booths, stuff like that. Me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of temp control, the reefer stuff. I'm okay with frozen, but the produce, man, you got to have thick skin to deal with the produce side. It's high risk, high reward. Yeah. But man, it take the sail out of your winds or the wind out of your sail real quick. Yeah. So me personally, I try to not have so much focus on the temp stuff. So I try to kind of keep it even keel, 20% here, 20% there. That way we're not over extended in one niche that all of a sudden could just go take a dump on me one day. With these hurricanes, FEMA happens and then capacity goes wherever the hurricanes are, this stuff kind of follows it. So I try to insulate myself from potential disaster.
Yeah, I love that diversification, that advice on diversification. I've talked about it many, many times before.
Yep.
The problem with most brokers and most agents is that 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their clients. And when I say 20% of their clients, they might only have 8, 7, or 8 or 10 shippers. So that means 2 or 3 shippers are controlling 80% of your revenue. And
Scary.
that's a recipe for disaster, right? Those are some sleepless nights.
Yep.
And it can cause a lot of stress. So you need to take more of a mutual fund approach, right? Where you are diversifying your customer base. I remember when I sold the company, we were doing $80 million in sales. And I think the number one customer back then was doing like 5 to 7% of our total revenue, right? So it was a very small percentage of the revenue. And then you can also diversify it in other industries. So you're not so heavy into just van freight, or you're not just so heavy into heavy haul or refrigerated. So diversifying there over time definitely will make your business more resilient, more sustainable, and will make for probably a little bit better sleep at night.
Well, the market is cyclical, right? But it's not cyclical across all niches. It just isn't. When the economy goes doo-doo, manufacturing kind of slows down, housing slows down, but guess what? Food doesn't. Food is a recession-proof commodity. I don't care how bad the economy is, everybody has to eat. Whether you have money or the government's giving you money for food, you're going to eat. So me personally, I feel like grocery is my number one area I focus on most that tries to keep me insulated from everything else that's cyclical. Now, in theory, that's great. But at the end of the day, we don't control what awards we're getting, what spot bids we're going to win. But in my professional opinion, I try to stay in the areas that have the strongest ability to weather the storm. But again, 2 hurricanes in the south right now, FEMA sucks up a lot of that capacity. It doesn't matter how strong your carrier base is. When you don't have enough trucks and you have too much freight, the market tips. And so, I don't rely necessarily on one niche. That's why heavy haul is great. Drayage is great. They all kind of come in their own season. UPS is one of my biggest customers. Well, in Q4, when everybody's moving nothing, I'm in the middle of peak season. So I try to kind of reverse engineer the pain points and keep my risk flat across the board as best I can.
No, I like that. I like that diversification strategy. And what you'll find out over time is that all it's going to do, it's not going to guarantee your success. It's not going to guarantee growth, but it's going to smooth the bumps in the road, right?
Yeah.
Because, you hear the old adage, cash is king. It's really not true, right? When you come to brokerage, what's king in brokerage is cash flow.
Cash flow, yeah.
Cash flow, right? Yeah. You've got to have a predictable and sustainable cash flow. Yep. You do these projects, right, where they start and stop, and then all of a sudden your cash flow goes to shit after you collect those invoices, right?
Yep.
And you can make some really good money on it, but ultimately, when you have fixed overhead, that cash flow is what has to survive and what really allows you to be sustainable. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about your agent business. How many agents do you have right now, approximately?
We have 10.
You have 10 total agents. And tell us a little bit about your most successful agent. You don't need to tell the name, obviously, but maybe tell us some revenue numbers and maybe some commissions that they're making, whatever you want to share.
I think our average agent commission this past Friday was $3,500
for a week.
For a week, yeah. Yeah, I pay out every week, every Friday. Everything picked up through Wednesday at noon gets paid out on Friday. So talk about cash flow for us. The cash flow for the agents is nonstop. They don't have to wait for the customer to pay. They don't have to wait for us to have invoices from the carriers. I pay them up front. I chase it down on the back end. Everybody's happy. Our average agent right now is probably booking 40, 50 loads a month. We're not nothing too crazy. Our top agent's probably doing 25% of our revenue, 100, 100 and a quarter. We're in that first couple months of ramp up for a couple of agents. So they're still getting used to us. We're getting used to them. I'm not afraid to take, a flyer on somebody who doesn't necessarily have a big book of business. I'd like to see 80 to 100 grand a month in revenue to talk to you. But if you could sell me on why that's not necessarily important, do you have a good customer base? Is there not a lot of customer crossover between other agents where you're fighting for, market share? Being that I have 10 agents, we don't have any crossover. Everybody's customers are exclusive. So yeah, I mean, the agent model has been, it's been a learning curve, but I'll tell you right now, it's been a force multiplier by far. You know,
Yeah,
I
it definitely
onboard
allows you to scale,
if I
obviously, right?
if I
I mean,
onboard one customer a month or one agent a month, my revenue goes up exponentially with an agent versus one customer. So I kind of looked at it from the other end, and that's really the way that it's been beneficial to us.
yeah, no, one thing I want you, anybody who's thinking about becoming an agent, right? I want to share one thing with you. What Jason said was his average agent last week made $3,500 in commission. That was the commission to them. Now they've got very low overhead. When I say
Yeah,
low overhead, their total overhead is probably
500.
500, less than, definitely less than $1,000 a month. Okay. A
Definitely.
month. So
Yep.
that right there is approximately what they'd be making on a yearly basis if they average that, right? As an
Yeah.
agent working from home. So it can be very lucrative. Okay.
Yeah.
It can be very lucrative. Now, not everybody's going to make that money. Not
Yep.
sometimes, but on average, what Jason just shared with you is that's kind of what his agents will in the
Yep.
range that they'll be. His top agent will be more, his newer agents will probably be a little bit less, but it'll average out to that. So that's amazing. So quick question for you. So, how are you finding your agents? How are you recruiting your agents?
Great
What's the
question.
primary source that you're using to develop those agent relationships?
I hate to say this out loud, but I'm fully transparent. 100% of my customer inbound and my agent inbound is from LinkedIn. 100%. I don't outsource. I don't advertise. I put out a post here and there on LinkedIn. People know me from my content, but I'm not actively selling our agent model every day. I might post twice a month. It's just from people getting to know me or referrals. That's it. It's that
Right.
simple. I don't spend money. I don't advertise heavy. Word of mouth is perfect for us. It's perfect.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, if anybody who's listened to me for more than more than 1 week or one video or one live knows
Yeah.
that I'm a huge advocate of LinkedIn and social
Yep.
selling, a huge advocate of creating content. I've been on LinkedIn since 2007, 2008.
Oof.
I remember when I remember what LinkedIn looked like back then. It was
Yeah.
very, very different,
Very
right? It
different. Yeah.
wasn't the same as it is today. It's much easier today, and in some ways, it's a little bit harder. But there are a lot more shippers using LinkedIn, so that's a big advantage.
Yes.
And there's much better tools, and of course, there's more competition. But like anything else, the cream rises to the top. And I know
Yep.
Jason and I connected through his content. That's how we initially connected, was through his content. And so yeah, so obviously it's working. So you're getting most of your agents through LinkedIn or referrals.
Yep.
So the question is now, and this is the hardest question for anybody to answer when they're new or starting out in the agent business model, right? If you're going to build your business as an agent business model, is what makes you different? The hardest part about a startup, right? Because you're relatively new, you've been in
Yep.
business for a year and a half,
Yeah.
but you're relatively new. The hardest part is trying to go out on an agent business model and compete with people who have had their agent business model and the product evolving for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Yep.
My old company, right?
Yeah.
We built the business using an agent business model. They have a lot of great tools. They've got a lot of great benefits. They've got a great brand. They've got a great
Yep.
reputation, right? So ultimately, how do you overcome that? What's the selling point for you in order to attract quality agents, right? Because we all know you could hire somebody who has zero experience.
Yeah.
You'll have a gluttony of those people that'll be reaching out to you after this interview. But the
Hopefully, yeah.
experienced people who have a book of business, how do you differentiate yourself there?
Again, it goes back to my content. I post 1 to 2 times a day. I'm pretty opinionated. I'm open-minded. The people that know of me know what they're getting when they come to me. So what separates me from a big brand is big brand awareness is a 3-digit initial on a masthead. Well, there's 1,000 people between the top and who you're going to deal with at those companies. People that come to me have my phone number, my email, my address. They can call me directly. I talk to my agents every day. I'm accessible. We grow together. They're at the bottom floor of what I hope to be $100 million a year company one day. So they get the added benefit of being at the ground floor of a startup. They get to help shape and mold the culture, the policies. While I have 10 years experience, I have 100 years experience between the 10 of us. So I get to leverage their opinion and their experience and vice versa. And there's times where I put a policy together where it doesn't vibe with half of the agents and we modify it to meet in the middle so that it works for everybody. So the way that I get to define what we do versus the big boys is you get Jason. Not only are you working for Max Freight, you get to work with me. And I don't say that in a egotistical way. I say that in an accessible way. My phone's
Yeah,
on 24/7. That's all there is to it.
that's the key. What you just said was what I was going to point out here, which is access,
Yes.
right? If you go out to a big brand who probably has hundreds or maybe even thousands of agents, okay, and you go out to them and you approach them, you're going to be working with a mid to low level manager
Yep.
who has his marching orders to hit
Yep.
certain metrics
Yep.
and has limited access to the decision makers that are even in his own organization.
Exactly.
Whereas if you work with a smaller brokerage, someone like Jason or other people that are, that are maybe been in business a year or 2 or 3 or 5 years,
Yep.
and are willing to, put a good product out there on the agent side, you can get access to the actual decision makers, influencers, people that are running the business, right?
Yep.
And so that was a huge differentiator when we first started doing the agent business model. I did the exact same thing as you. I talked to every single agent that came on board. I developed a relationship with every single agent that came on board. They had my cell phone number. They had my email. They had access. We had regular meetings.
It helps with attrition. It helps with turnover. When you have that connection, they're not looking to hook and book somewhere else. Someone can't poach them as easy as if somebody who was just a number in a machine on a spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many agents, when I had my brokerage, we were never the brokerage who paid 70 or 75% commission. We never did. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
And the way we justified that is we provided more benefits and tools than you'll make going to another brokerage by getting 3 or 5 or even sometimes 10% more in commission. And I can't tell you how many agents came to us and said, listen, I was offered 70%. I'm going to stay with you at 65 because of X or because of Y or because of the trust level or because of the relationship or because of the tools or because of whatever other thing that was important to them. So what I would urge you, Jason, and I think I may have already even shared this with you privately in some messaging in the past, and what I would urge anybody else who's interested in leveraging an agent business model is this. You have to look at your agent business model as if it's a product.
Yes.
And you have to develop that product. You have to create a competitive product to everybody out there. But it doesn't mean you have to be the same. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't be the same. You should be different. You need to figure out a way to be different. You've heard me say it, and you've probably heard other people say it. Different is better than better. It'll be very hard for you as a startup to be better than everybody at the agent model. You may not have better technology. You may not have better training. You may not have a better commission split. You may not have better benefits or whatever that better might be, but being different isn't that hard. And that's the other thing that Jason's doing. He's being different. He is posting on LinkedIn. He's being very transparent. He's being very vulnerable. He's being different in that he's giving access, right? The CEO of Landstar, okay, or the CEO of Echo Global or of Global Trans or any of those companies is not getting on the phone with an agent. I don't care if you're an agent that's doing 50 million a year. He's not getting on the phone with you. Okay. No. So, I wanted to hone in on that because I think that's a really important lesson that people need to take away from this because, it's just, you have to take that type of perspective. If you think you're going to start a freight brokerage and you're going to go out here and you're going to just start hiring agents and start making a fortune and sticking, $5 or $10 or $20,000 a week or month in your pocket, it's just not going to happen that way. You have to be intentional, right?
Yes.
Be very intentional. So anything you want to add to that, Jason?
Yeah, I think a segue to a different value prop that we offer is because we're smaller and it's me as the decision maker, we're much more adaptable, quicker. We don't have to go through multiple meetings with, talking heads and points. If something doesn't feel right, we're on the phone together as a group and we make a decision right now. So the ability to adapt to market conditions in real time really is what separates us. Because when Yellow took a dump, a couple months ago, there were some other companies out there who wanted to keep riding with Yellow. And I had agents come to me saying, I have 1,000 loads on Yellow's deck right now. If they shut the doors, how are my customers going to get their freight back? I said, we cut Yellow off a month ago to prevent that. That's the adaptability that helped protect us from some things in the future that we could foresee coming. And that turned into 2 or 3 agents who just saw the ability to have input and it be a move, it moved the needle, if you will. So
yeah, that's an advantage. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's an advantage that small businesses have over large businesses,
yeah,
just as a general rule, not even talking about the agent model,
yeah,
right? So your ability to make decisions quicker and to
yeah,
adapt is a benefit that you have. It's not most people look at being small as a negative.
it's
That's a
disadvantage, no,
positive, right?
100%.
When you have
Yeah,
a big company, it's very hard to steer that ship, right? You mentioned Allen Lund. That's a big company. When they need to
yes,
make a policy change, it's very hard to steer that ship and things move very, very slow. But when
yes, sir.
you decide, or your management team or your agent base or whatever decides to make a change, you can pivot very quickly and make those adjustments. And so that's a
Yep.
huge advantage. So I love that you brought that up. That's very important.
We also don't have crazy overhead, so if we make a mistake, it doesn't eat at the bottom line as much. We don't have to be as calculated. We can be a little bit more risky
Yeah.
and a little less conservative right now, but as we grow, we lose that leverage. So we might as well make those decisions now so that we can kind of pivot in the cultural direction we want to move towards.
All right. One more thing I want to hit on, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A, and that
Awesome.
is um, when you bring on an agent, right? If they have a book of business, and I'm kind of teeing this up for you because I think this
Yep.
is important. We haven't talked
Yep.
about it yet. When you bring on an agent who's got a book of business, what happens, or how do you handle some sort of a conflict with an owner, the owner of that shipper, the agency owner of that shipper, or
Yeah.
have you even run into that much? Because I know in a lot of big brokerages, right? If you're an agent who's got a $2 million book of business and you try to go to Landstar, you try to go to Global Trans, you try to go to my old company, there's definitely going to be some crossover and conflict, and you're
100%.
probably not going to be able to transition 100% of your book. How has that worked out for you? How has that impacted you? What have you seen there?
So far, there has been zero crossover between agents, so we've been lucky. But I have a policy in place, and I talk to every agent about it before they onboard. So let's say, for example, two agents have a crossover of a customer. Well, let's look at it objectively. Let's not just say, okay, John has, we'll call it UPS, right? And then Steve comes over and has UPS. Well, UPS is a big company. There's no way John's handling 100% of UPS's freight. Let's look at objectively, what lanes do you have? Who are the planners you're talking to? If you're not even in the same geographic location, there really isn't any crossover. Now, I make sure that they talk to each other about it. If there comes a time where there's some crossover, obviously the person that was here first, they get precedence, they get priority. But if there needs to be a rev split, let's say Steve comes over with, UPS, and John's like, hey, I want 5% of everything you bring in, and I'll let you have wide open, go do you. If they can come to an agreement where, it's 0 or 5% or nothing, why would anyone say no to 0 or nothing? Let's figure out a way to accommodate everybody commission split wise. So there is discussion that can happen, but if there's no crossover and it's the same company, there's no commission split. You do you and you do you, and everybody wins.
So the advantage there is, one, you can customize the solution, for that, so that the hand fits the glove.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing I want to point out to the audience is the glaringly obvious one that we hadn't talked about up till this point, which is if you work with a smaller brokerage, they've got the tools and they've got the credit and they've got the fundamentals in place.
Yep.
And you have a book of business, when you're migrating into that company, you're probably not going to run into a lot of crossover, and you're going to be able to migrate all of, if not a very high percentage of your book. But if you go to the big brokerages, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to migrate 100% of that book, because number one, they won't customize it. It's a one size fits all. And number two, they've got legacy agents that have been doing business with those companies for 5 or 10 or 20 years, and they're not going to risk losing them. So you're going to lose that client. So that's another differentiator for a guy like Jason in a smaller brokerage, is that you're going to be able to retain a lot bigger percentage of your freight. And then the other side is, even if you're new coming in, and you come in and you want to go out and get those bigger clients, a lot of those clients are already going to be taken by other agents in a big brokerage, but they're wide open in Jason's, because the reality is, even though he's got 10 agents, he's probably only has less than 100 active shippers in any given month. And that means there are millions out there for you to choose from. So, I mean, I'm not trying to sell Jason's program here, but it seems like it's selling itself, because I already was in his shoes. I did exactly what he was doing. So I know the playbook, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have him on, because I appreciate where he is. I think he's doing a great job. Listen, one more thing before we go. What's the biggest lesson you've learned since venturing off into your own brokerage? If you had one thing, because I know there have been many, I'm sure that every week and every day there's new things you're learning. But if there was one thing you learned along the way since starting the brokerage, what would it be? What would you want to share with the audience?
Nobody talks about how important or even what credit looks like on the other side of the fence. Nobody. You can have a million loads. Good luck finding customer or carriers that factoring companies will extend you credit as a new brokerage. And so there's a lot of, I'll pay you half now, half later, a lot of Venmo, a lot of creative financing on the front end. You know, we factor for a reason in the beginning to help with cash flow. I had money put away for those what ifs, and I paid a lot of people up front. The biggest hurdle I had, and you don't really have it as an agent, because when you work for a company, they have their own credit. But as a new brokerage, man, that credit was rough. And I asked 10 different factoring companies how the credit worked. They all give me different answers. So there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding of what it really looks like. And at the end of the day, man, I probably should have started 6 months after I got my MC to let it age a little bit. Went and got a Love's Fuel card, a Staples card, worked up my business credit on the back end of the Ansonia credit, because it's not just Dun & Bradstreet. It's your Ansonia credit score is really your broker credit score. So I had no idea that was even a thing. I went out and got a business credit card. I started building up my business credit. It had no effect. When I started getting declined credit, I thought, I have good credit. What am I missing? And then I got on the phone with these guys and I thought, okay, now I'm understanding. So the credit was the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, your transportation related credit is weighted way beyond what your non-transportation related credit is. And every load board, whether it's DAT or truck stop or whatever load board, has some sort of credit feature built into it where every carrier can see how long the broker's been in business and what their average days to pay are. And if you don't have a credit rating on a load board, you're going to find it can be challenging to find carriers to move your loads. And there's creative ways you can do it. And you can do quick pays and you can do halves and halves and you can do those things and they will work and you will build your credit pretty quickly. Within 90 days, you'll build your credit up to the point where most carriers will work with you if you're moving loads consistently. But that first 90 days can be a challenge, but that's how it is in every business. Every business is that way. You think a bank is going to loan you money? You think a major supplier is going to loan you money? I mean, if you go to a pizza place, if you open a pizza place and you go and you want to buy dough and whatever and all this different, food ingredients from Cisco, you think they're going to give you credit? No, they're not. And if they do, they'll give you $1,000 and then you got to turn that over and then you got to turn that over and turn that over. That's just the nature of a startup, right? And so, but Jason pointed out a really good point, and that is if that is going to become an issue for you, become an agent. Start as an agent because you no longer have that issue. You don't have to worry about the billing. You don't have to worry about the collections. You don't have to worry about the credit. You don't have to worry about the insurance. You focus on getting and serving and supporting your customers. And for that, you make 50, 60, 70% of the profit with very little risk.
It's funny you brought that up. Some of the agents that I brought on started their own brokerage and struggled in areas that I did. And I brought them on to age their MC, teach them all of the hiccups they're going to have when they flip the switch back into their own brokerage. But they've also developed a carrier base, a customer base that they can leverage when they move over. And it's easier for them to, spend 6 months as an agent while their broker MC ages and then put it all together in a year rather than fail in 6 months because you just couldn't get it to work. So that's another thing that I offer is, look, if you want to be your own company, I don't mind. I'm not here to keep you forever. I love helping people get to the decision that I made because the freedom that comes with that is something I can't put words into it. So I love helping people level up. This is a stepping stone to the next stage. So, and I don't mind being that incubator at all.
Love it. Well, listen, Jason, let everybody know how they can connect with you, learn more about you on LinkedIn, maybe check out your agent program, and then we'll wrap it up for today.
Of course. I post on LinkedIn 1 to 2 times a day, Monday through Friday. So Jason Rabine on LinkedIn. You could send me an email at jason@Max Freightlines, or you could check us out on our website, maxfreightlines.com.
Love it. Perfect. Listen, thank you so much for being here. Congrats on all your success.
Appreciate you.
You know, we'll stay in touch. Maybe we'll touch base in a year or two and see how business continues to progress. But again, thank you so much for being here. Anybody that wants to connect with Jason, we'll put the links here on the screen. And for those of you that are curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, and you're looking for information, maybe, you know, you're struggling, you're finding some information on YouTube, and you're finding some stuff on Instagram, and you're finding some stuff on TikTok and maybe on Google, but it's not all jiving. Check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Trained over 10,000 students. We offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. Check that out. Truly appreciate you guys being here. Make sure you join me for next week's Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. All right, cool. Listen, for those of you that want to stick around for the Q&A, Jason and I are going to grab a quick drink to wet our whistle here, and we'll jump into the Q&A. We're not going to do a giveaway today, even though we normally do. But I would ask you all right now, before we do the Q&A, before you start typing your questions in, all right, what I'd like you to do for me right now, if you enjoyed this, if you learned one thing along the way, hit the like button, and no matter where you are, subscribe or follow, right? You know, that's the price of admission today. There was no credit card. We didn't gate it. This is all free. It'll be on replay. Hit the like button, like and follow, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A. So feel free. You guys can start putting your questions in the comments. If you have a specific question for Jason, you know, type it to Jason. If you want to ask me or you want to ask both, we can both chime in on it. So Jason, be prepared for a whole bunch of questions, because here's the thing. We will have way more questions than we will have time. Okay. So we will not get to everybody's questions today. We will do our best. Maybe we can come back in days or weeks to follow and try to reply in some of the comments, but we definitely will not get to everybody's questions today. So please be patient. Question number one is, hey, Jason, do your agents have their own sub-agents?
Absolutely. When you're an agent, you're your own company. You know, you look at it, and the way that I look at it is you're an agency. So if you're a one-man band and you scale to the point where you need people underneath you and you can support an ecosystem underneath that, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're an independent contractor as an agent. Yeah. You're not an employee. You make your own rules. Now, there are some guidelines and some standard operating procedures and things of that, you know, you will have to follow with any brokerage. But yes. Yeah, as an independent contractor, you can hire, whether it be W-2 employees or whether it be independent contractors, whatever you choose to do. So yeah, I think that's a great question.
Landstar has agents, and then they have agencies with 50, 100, 200 people underneath them. They're their own company.
Yeah. By the way, I think some of the largest agents in Landstar, last I heard, and this is probably going to blow your mind, most of you. Yeah. The largest agency in Landstar does over 100 million in sales a year as an agent.
It's crazy.
As an agency, they do 100 million. They don't own their own brokerage. They don't have their own MC. They're an agency, and they do over $100 million a year. That was what I had heard in a conversation with, you know, someone on the inside that has that type of insight. So, yeah, pretty crazy, right? All right, let's see. Another question for Jason. How did you finally build your transportation credit, and how long did it take?
To be honest, it took us 9 months. It really did, because as I said earlier, a lot of our legacy.
But 9 months to go from where to where? I mean, it progressed along the way. You went from no credit to, you know, low credit to average credit to good credit. I mean,
no, I didn't have any credit score whatsoever for the first 7-8 months, because 99% of the carriers I booked were old carriers of mine who didn't factor. If they're not factoring, there's nobody to report your credit. Very few self-funded companies report your credit. So if you're booking a carrier and they don't, you know, use a factoring company and you pay them directly, they're not turning around and reporting all of that credit to the reporting agencies. It just doesn't happen. You can request that they do, but nobody told me that.
Yeah, so yeah. That's the hack, right?
That's the
one.
The
hack is, yeah, that's the hack. You go to the carriers that you're paying if they're not using factoring, and you develop that relationship and you leverage them to report. Yeah, you request to them to report, and then once those days to pay show up, your credit score will show up.
I didn't get my first credit score on DAT until December, and we opened in March. So it took a heck of a long time, and it's slowly but surely. And up until March, we were still getting denials. You know, OTR didn't give me credit till March.
So if you could change one thing, that hack, you would definitely have requested those
that.
carriers.
Here's the hack. This is the crazy hack. I have my own factoring company. Mm-hmm. If I can get a notice of assignment or the factoring company's account number and routing number, I can just quick pay them tomorrow. That money is in the carrier's cash account. They don't have to give me credit. I didn't realize that until it was too late, but I just started quick paying factoring companies. And then what are they going to do? Say no to the money? No, they're going to put it in the cash account. They're going to charge their carrier their money. And now I have a rapport with them that I'm paying them in 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. Eventually, I just called them all and said, I've already been paying you. You haven't given me credit, but you can see that I've been paying you. And that I hacked my way into getting credit from most of these guys.
Yeah. So that's one way you can do it with the factoring company. And then the other side is you could, if the carriers are not using a factoring company and they're self-funding, then you can develop a relationship with them and have them report directly to Ansonia or to whatever credit reporting agency is. All they need to do is literally submit an online form saying that here's the company name, here's their MC number, here's their address, here's who the broker is, here's the average days to pay. They might ask for some invoice samples or something, but ultimately it's not that difficult and you can start building. That's what a lot of students will do, is that they'll get that flywheel going, because even if you have B credit, right, a large percentage of carriers will work with you. If you have A credit, then pretty much everybody will work with you. Right?
Yeah. So here's the other thing too, is the smaller the factoring company, the higher their risk is, because they don't have a diversified portfolio. Right. RTS, OTR, those big boys, they'll give you credit, but it's the small mom and pops. They have a smaller base. 1 or 2 non-pays hurts their bottom line exponentially. I found it's harder to get credit with the smaller no-name factoring companies than the big boys.
Yeah, and what I found is that there's probably about 5 to 7 factoring companies out there that control about 90% of the market.
Yes.
Okay. So if you can develop a relationship and a rapport and you start infiltrating into those bigger factoring companies, the world of credit is going to start opening up to you. The carrier base is going to start opening up to you. Right. But you could have 20 mom and pop factoring companies, that aren't doing a whole lot, and you're not going to get access to a whole lot of trucks because they just don't have those relationships.
The crazy thing, the factoring companies aren't required to report your credit. OTR does not report external credit. They only use it for internal risk mitigation. They don't report to Ansonia, and they're a top 3. So just because you're paying a factoring company doesn't mean they're reporting your credit. Right. Another thing too is if you pay your factoring company too quickly, there's no money left on the ledger and they report twice a month. I was paying everybody in 3 days. My problem was I didn't know that it needed to be at least 15 for there to be money on the ledger for them to report on the 1st and the 15th. So that's why it took me 9 months to get my number up, was because I paid everybody very quickly, thinking it would help me, and it hurt me.
When it was factoring, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that was a great nugget right there for sure.
Yep.
All right. Question from Jim Hand. Dennis, do you know what my question is? Jason, what is your? Yeah, Jim asks this every interview, or he has on several interviews. If you were cold calling, and I know okay, so he doesn't cold call. So there you go. So he already said he gets his business from either referral or from LinkedIn.
Yep. And if I had one, I wouldn't read off a script. I would wing it, because when you cold call enough, your basis points. You can't like I did door-to-door sales. I did face-to-face. That's how I learned how to sell. Yeah. You cannot sound like a robot. Every person is different. Their reaction's different. Their facial expressions are different. You have to be a stone cold killer. You have to be able to navigate the ups and downs before they're even thrown at you. So if I were to do a cold call, I'd have a script for a week. I'd call people and just use it as a basis to kind of learn what I want to say. I would record myself. That's a big one. Record yourself and see it on video. Look at your facial expressions. Look at your own reactions, because the way that your face is reacting to what people are saying to you, when you respond to it, they can pick that up. And so you have to be very middle of the road. But if I did outbound cold calling, it wouldn't be off a script. I would just wing it 100% of the time. But you can't do that out of the gate. You have to have some starting point. Yeah. So start with a script, do it enough repetitively where you can just wing it on the go.
Yeah. You have a basic outline.
Yeah.
Okay. Leverage that to start building some confidence.
Yep.
Know going in, you're going to get a whole bunch of rejection, but know this for sure. Your 10th call is going to be better than your first call, and your 50th call is going to be better than your 10th call, and your 100th call is going to be better than your 50th call. Your goal is to make.
You'll be able to see them coming before they hit you with them. So if you knock them out of the park before they ask, that's when you know your script, if you will, is awesome.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in not having a fixed script as well, and leveraging sales intelligence and leveraging data that you can collect, whether that be through Google or their website or LinkedIn, as a way to create a unique and compelling sales hook, right? The goal for me, my number one goal, and Jim, you know this, and I'm sharing this with the rest of the audience. My number one goal when I get on the phone, if I were to get on the phone with a prospect, is to sound completely different than any other person that's ever called them.
Yep.
I would not be saying the same words. I use some of the same lingo,
sure,
but my sales hook would be unique.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to do that if you take 3-5 minutes to gather a little bit of research, and you understand, some of the common pain points and issues and talking points associated with your niche. So yeah, I agree with Jason. You definitely don't want to sound like you're reading, but you're going to have to practice. And then eventually you'll start seeing some results.
Record yourself. It's awkward.
For sure.
Awkward, but I'm telling you, the first guy that I worked with, Brian, who's a sales guy, Alan Lund, he'd go in his office, he'd record it, and then he'd watch him. And I always thought he was weird. And then I sat down with him as he audited his own recording, and you get more confident because you can pick up your own tells. If you're reading a script, you're not listening to hear, you're listening to make your next statement.
Yeah.
You take away the leverage of sound. You don't want to sound like a robot. You just want to have a regular conversation. So
yeah, and so that could be you just recording yourself into a script, into an intro, or it could be a role playing. So imagine Jason and I on the phone, and Jason's the broker, I'm the shipper, and we're role playing, right? We're going back and forth. We're having a live conversation that's dynamic. My job is to throw him curveballs, so he has to hit the ball, right?
Yeah.
And so imagine if you did that for 30 minutes a day for 30 days. Okay. Imagine how much better you would be on day 10 and 20 and 30, and the skill that you would have, because that's what this really is all about. It's developing those skills and developing those habits and developing those muscles. And so it doesn't just come inherently, but it is a learned skill. Some people say that salesmen are born. Some people say that salesmen are built. I used to believe 20 years ago that salesmen were born, and if you didn't have that sales gene, that you were going to fail. I don't believe that any longer, because I've seen and taken people who had no experience in sales, had no desire to be in sales, who took the framework that I shared with them and then leveraged that to grow their business, whatever that business was, to make. And of course you got to make it your own. I mean, personality, that's what people, you mentioned that earlier. People do business with people. They don't do business with businesses. You said that when you migrated from Alan Lund, you had people contacting you. They wanted to do business with Jason because of the ABCs of Jason, right? They like Jason as a person. They have things in common with you. They have a certain trust level with you. People typically, when it comes to particularly the logistics industry, they don't have a whole lot of trust for a brand. I mean, brand helps. It does help, but that person is who they really rely on and who they really trust day in and day out. So
that's why I don't have a non-compete. I know darn well that if you came to me, you brought something with you. I really didn't give you much tools other than the ability to run your own company, to grow your business. Why would I poach that from you? So there's no non-compete here. You bring it, you build it. If you want to go, I'll do everything I can to help you grow at the next level.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But Brazilian. Okay, so here's a question. I'm an agent for a bigger brokerage, but also have my MC number aging it. What is the best load board for a new broker? What's your 2 cents on that? What load board do you rely on the most when you need to?
It's that or nothing.
Yeah.
I've never been a huge proponent of truck stop, but I've also done dry van 1-in-1 stuff. Truck stop's good for a little bit more of a niche, that open deck stuff, box truck stuff. The majority of the big players are on that. That's where I've always lived, and that's, I'll live and die by that. Yeah. Now, you brought a great point up when you need to use it. If you have to, if the only way for you to survive is using the load board, don't take this the wrong way, but you've got some learning to do. You better learn how to source because that's going to go down from time to time, or there's just not going to be somebody in that area that DAT is going to give you access to. You better find a way. And there's a ton of other ways other than the load board, but DAT is by far, in my opinion, the best.
Yeah. DAT and truck stop. I mean, we had both, right? We had a whole bunch of load boards, but DAT and truck stop, I think DAT was the first one we had.
Definitely.
But you bring up a really good point, and that is this, as a startup, there's a very high likelihood that you're going to have to post to load boards in order to source trucks that are in that market. It's just the nature of a startup. Here's the secret. The secret is to develop that relationship with that carrier so that they never find out about your loads through the load board. They find out the loads directly through you. And now you're developing that relationship so you can take that capacity off of the load boards and start owning it and controlling it. Right. And so that's how every broker starts to develop those carrier relationships, is the load board. But then over time, 6 months, a year, 2 years, they rarely have to post because they have those relationships, and they know that they can call Johnny for the Buffalo to Chicago, and they know they can call Bill for the Pittsburgh to Atlanta. I mean, they know those lanes. They have trust, and that way you don't have to set up new carriers every single day and and roll the dice, because the fact is, whenever you bring on a new carrier, even if you vet them properly, you can have very unpredictable service, and you can have a bad outcome, which is going to have a huge impact on how your shipper views you, of course.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, the more you post a load on DAT, the more likelihood of having your freight stolen or double brokered is. So in my opinion, if you have to put it on DAT, your compliance checklist better be exponentially better than when you're just calling a pre-vetted carrier you have a relationship with.
Without doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Yep. Question, where are we at? Oh, shoot. Here we go. All right, here you go. Question from Jake. How are you sourcing your dry freight lead list? So when you search for leads to reach out to, or when you search for leads to maybe supply your agents, or however you're doing that, when you're searching for leads for dry freight, where do you go? What's a good source? What's a good website?
Okay, so while I personally don't do any outbound, there is always 10,000 leads in our CRM across all of our agents. I make sure to supply a healthy lead list for them. Now, you can pay a lot of money for Zoom Info, or you can go to Fiverr and pay $100 and have 10,000 leads pulled in a very specific filtered fashion. I do that once a month. So instead of paying $1,500 a year or whatever, or a month for Zoom Info, I just go to people who have it, an enterprise level account, and I buy leads from them directly.
Yeah, just so you know, he just brought up a really good point. When you go to these, let's say these, a Fiverr or an Upwork or some sort of a gig type site, right, where it's a freelancer site.
Yep.
They already pay for access to Zoom Info or to these other databases.
Yep.
And what they're doing is they're selling capacity into that, right? So that if you want 5,000 or 10,000 or 1,000 or 100,000, they're going to sell to you a lot cheaper, because they're going to sell that over and over again. And, they're leveraging that resource. So you can definitely leverage something like a Fiverr or Upwork to do that. Now, I would tell you that you'd be very, very, start out with a small test when you're working with somebody like that. And then make sure the quality of the data is there, because garbage in, garbage out, right? If the phone numbers are bad, the addresses are bad, the emails are bad, if you can get the name of the ship, the prospect and the title, that's more value than not having it, because otherwise you're going to have to look it up, right? So the quality of the data is what you're paying for. And I have students and friends and people that I know that use Info and pay a lot of money for it and get a huge return on investment.
Of course.
But they also have, they've also
income coming in, and they know how to use it and exploit it. I will give you a life hack. This is the best information I give to all my agents. Find a niche, then find an association or a trade show. They'll have contact names on every trade show. A vendor list of the Potato Association in Vegas has 500 potato shippers. They'll give you the names, phone numbers, addresses, bang, bang, right there. If you just know where to look, there's cultivated lists for free, and trade shows are the best. But you have to be niche specific, because if not, you don't know where to start.
Yeah, associations are amazing. Yeah, associations are great, especially if you're really diving into a specific niche, right?
Yep.
If you're doing heavy haul or you're doing produce or you're doing building supplies, they all have trade associations. You can join that trade association as a vendor very cost effectively, not a
Yeah.
lot of money, and get access to that. And not only that, but now you have a warm lead because you have somebody, you when you reach out to them, you could let them know that you have that in common. We're a part of the same trade organization.
Yeah.
I know XYZ who's also in the organization. I mean, so it gives you a little bit more of a warm market as well. So no, I like that. Good idea.
The fun part about that is, like, say for example, you're growing Christmas trees. Well, if you're growing Christmas trees, who's supplying the wire around the Christmas trees? Who's supplying the bottoms? It's not just the raw product. There's also additional commodities that go into the final product.
Yep. The
So if you get
burlap,
in,
all that.
oh man, that's 100. Like our seed potato shippers. Once they plant the seeds, well, there's 3 or 4 other shippers from the time it goes into the ground, from the time it gets to the consumer. So it could become French fries. I mean, there's so many layers of potential there. You just have to look at it with a wider net.
All right, cool. So listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to answer one more question, then we're going to wrap it up for today because it's 1:00, and I promised Jason I would get him off here in an hour. Let's see. I'm trying to find a good question here. Some of these are good questions. Okay, so here we'll kind of tee it up because I think a lot of people are going to want to know the answer to this question. So, question is to you, Jason: what does the application process to get hired as an agent look like?
Great question. There isn't one. There's no application. I put out a post on LinkedIn. You send me a message. My questions are pretty simple. What does your book of business look like? What did you make last month? Revenue wise and profit wise, and do you have a non-compete or non-solicit? The answers to those questions either lead to a, hey, thanks, but it's not going to work for me, or let's hop on a call. If we get on a call, it's a 15 to 20 minute brief. Hey, break down the answers to the questions that I asked you. And then if I'm feeling good and they're feeling good, 100% of the time, it's let's sleep on it and talk again tomorrow. I want you to sleep on the conversation. I want to sleep on the conversation. And I ask them to call me back if they're serious. If they do, I know they're serious. If they don't, it is what it is. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, perfect. Love it. All right. Well, listen, first of all, Jason, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sticking around for the Q&A. I truly appreciate it. One more thing I want to share before I go. Listen, I am going to be opening up my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator very soon. That's my 5-week Freight Broker Sales coaching program where I take that piece of my brain, I transplant it into your head, teach you the best strategies, tactics, tools in my entire Freight Broker Sales system, right? Whether that be cold outbound through the phone or email or LinkedIn, customer retention and development, all of it, right? The whole ball of wax. And I teach you that in a 5-week coaching program, but that program sells out very quick. So I sell it through a wait list, which means you got to get on the wait list, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/wait list. If you do that, you'll be the first to get notified when I release the program, which means you'll get all the full details, the price, everything you need to know. And then you'll be able to instantly enroll and we can work together. I'll be your Freight Broker Sales Coach, help you through those early stages of getting customers, implementing it in your business. So if you're curious about that, get on the wait list. It's going to open up probably in the next few weeks. And when it does, it will sell out in days. It always does. I limit it to under 100 people. I may limit it to 50 people this time. It depends. But ultimately, get on the wait list, and appreciate everybody joining. Jason, thank you so much for being here. Make sure you guys come back every Monday for a new Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Hit the like button, subscribe. Make sure you follow Jason on LinkedIn, and we'll talk again next week on another Freight Broker Bootcamp Live.